Joining us is Ray McGovern, native of New York, Washington. In the early 60s, he was an Army infantry intelligence officer in Vietnam. He served as a CIA analyst for the administration of John F. Kennedy to that of George H.W. Bush. Ray briefed one-on-one President Ronald Reagan, most senior national security advisors from 81 to 85. He was his favorite briefer. Fluent in Russian, German, and Spanish, Ray holds an MA in Russian from Fordham University, a certificate of theology studies from Georgetown. He's also a graduate of Harvard Business School's advanced management program. He also holds a certificate in theology and studies from Georgetown University, raymcgovern.com. And he also founded a veteran intelligence agency group, For Sanity, as he calls it. And he famously would confront Rumsfeld lying about how they found WMDs in Iraq when he was running open psyops, unchallenged on CNN and Fox News. Now, I wanted to get him on about Syria, IS, Iraq, the breakup of that country, his take on what's really happening. I wanted to get into the police state, the MRAPs being put in place. But I want to first throw a curveball at Ray. Snowden says there's a holy you-know-what-T smoking gun revelation coming. Whistleblower says government believes he has information that would be the death of them all politically, close quote. Now, I have a lot of NSA whistleblowers over the years that we've had on the show. We've had William Binney on. We've had Seabell Edmonds on. We've had Wayne Madsen on. We've had just so many others have leaked me information. I mean, I got Snowden-type stuff when I was first on air in the mid-'90s. Had no idea how big it was. With telecom whistleblowers about big hubs listening to everything and Keyword and Echelon. Then I had James Bamford on. But I know Ray knows about a lot of this, and we don't know what this particularly is, but I have a good idea about a whole trove of things that could bring down the political system, and what would they do to distract from that? So I want to just hit the waterfront with Ray, because I know we can go into each issue and really give us a briefing on each item, but if he had 10 minutes, which I'm going to give him the floor here and try to shut up, to give people a global briefing on the state of the world, I want him to give us his, very accurate analysis, but also he's a very moral person. And knowing him now for about 10 years, putting him in one of my films, he doesn't mince words, and I think really gives us his real take on things without putting it through an establishment filter or darkly. And so I want to get his big picture take and then hone in on what he thinks is most important. But first off, what do you think the new Snowden info could be, Ray?
Well, Alex, good to be back with you. That is a curveball. Could you give me a minute to get my catcher's mitt? I'd only be speculating. But I imagine, given what Glenn Greenwald has hinted at in the past, that there are names and there are numbers and there are incredibly heinous snooping activities going on against very important people. I'll let you guess who they are, but they couldn't be more important in our country. And once that's revealed, one would expect that substance you mentioned to hit the fan. But the way things are working, Alex, with the executive and the Congress and parts of our judicial system all kind of complicit in these crimes against our Constitution, I'd have to say have to be from Missouri as to whether anything would be done about this. Even the press, of course, the mainstream press, I'm not talking about you and others on the internet, the mainstream press is complicit in this. So, yes, I'm sure there'll be more shocking revelations. I expect my name and yours to show up on one of these lists sometime soon. But whether or not this will have any impact, we'll just have to see. That's my best guess.
How big are the overall revelations so far from Snowden and others? How much is that affecting the power structure? Or is it almost allowing them to come out of the closet, caught lying about illegal political spying, and then if they don't get in trouble or if they don't get reversed, it almost sets the precedent?
That's the problem. Once Obama decided that he'd only look forward and he wouldn't look back, That's a abnegation of his responsibility to see to it that the laws of the land are faithfully discharged. That's a constitutional embarrassment. And so not only with the torturers, but we'll take James Clapper, the National Intelligence Director, who sits over 16, count them, 16 intelligence agencies in our government. He was asked on the 12th of March last year by a senator, Senator Ron Wyden, does the NSA collect any data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans? Clapper, no, sir. Not wittingly. Now, 2 months later, he gave a letter to the head of that committee saying, oh, what I said was, quote, clearly erroneous, end quote. Sorry about that. Now, he was under oath. He's the head of the director of national intelligence. He lied under oath. He told Andrea Mitchell, well, I said the least untruthful thing. Well, what will you come to here when the head of intelligence lies and then there are no consequences? So I'm afraid your point is right, that as long as we have people covering up for one another, John Brennan included, of course, with this famous torture memo that the Senate Intelligence Committee has completed, as long as you have no accountability, and as long as nobody in Congress except Ron Wyden and Udall from Colorado, nobody has any guts, it's very different, Alex, from the situation in the mid-'70s when Frank Church from Idaho and a couple other people, Betsky in the House, stood up and said, you know, these CIA, NSA, Army intelligence abuses are just gone too far. We're going to have a real investigation. Now, as a sort of a corollary to this, guess what the first thing Frank Church found out? He found out that J. Edgar Hoover was wiretapping all his phones.
Of course.
I mean, so we put an end to J. Edgar Hoover's wiretap. That's actually J. Edgar Hoover went away, which was sort of a miracle. And we instituted some laws, including the FISA Act of 1978, which expressly prohibited the kinds of infringements on our Fourth Amendment rights that had been entered into before, and now we see on steroids. So it's a situation where we have to get out in the streets, where we citizens have to put our bodies into the machine, or else it's never going to stop.
Ray McGovern, you've lived a lot of years and seen a lot, not just in the White House, but Vietnam, you name it. Describing the slow evolution of America, getting better in some ways, but worse in others. I didn't live through a lot of that. I'm 40, but I've studied it. And I've got to say, America overall is degenerating into a kleptocratic, weird, corporate, fascist, bizarro world, and seems to be rotting now. Seems to be just malaise is setting in. And it's not even like a hyper-tyranny where the Nazis are rounding up all their enemies. Of course, they're killing a lot of innocents overseas. They're mainly just doing it all out in the open, flaunting it in a grotesque display of above-the-law behavior. I mean, how would you describe what we are today?
Well, I would say that we're an extra-constitutional society right now. And the thing that bothers me most, Alex, is something that, you know, when you're 51 years in this town of Washington, you see a lot of change. Well, there's one change that dwarfs all the other changes, and that is that we no longer have in any real sense a free media, and that is big. Look at how the media has distorted A, B, C, and D. Look how it's distorting the coverage on Gaza, on Ukraine, any big-time conflict, the media will distort it. What's the result of that? Well, most Americans don't have a clue as to what's going on. And that's really, really, really dangerous. Jefferson, Madison, many people pointed out that without a free press, there can be no democracy. And so that's the main bugaboo here. And that's why your job and my job, to the degree we're trying to spread some truth around, is so terribly important. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is this, that whereas the fourth estate dead, okay? Fourth estate, some of your listeners probably remember that expression was coined by Edmund Burke, an English member of Parliament back in the late 18th century. Now, he stood in Parliament. At that time, there were three houses, two in Commons, one in Lords, and he said, I'm very proud to be part of this first estate. That's what they call it there, the First Estate House of Commons. But more important than I and all the rest of you MPs are the people in the Fourth Estate. He looked at the balcony, and of course they were all men in those days, but he was looking at the press, the pulp press. He said, you are more important than all of us because you hold us accountable. Without you, we can't be a democracy. Now that's the Fourth Estate, and it's dead. Now, good news, there's a Fifth Estate. I'm looking at it here. I'm on Skype. You're doing it here. There are all kinds of ways to reach people,